The night sky of her world was always filled with broken stars. That was what the young alien girl believed when she looked up at the wreck fields above her planet. Pieces of old ships drifted in orbit, glowing faintly like scars of a forgotten war. Her name was Kayla. She was not a soldier, not a leader, only a curious explorer who loved to search in places others feared to go. Most people of her planet avoided the wreck fields. They called it cursed. They said dangerous machines still slept there, but Kayla's heart always pulled her toward the unknown. On this day, her small survey craft moved silently among the giant bones of ships. She was mapping signals for the Science Guild. It was supposed to be routine, but suddenly her scanner caught something strange. It was not the usual broken metal echo. It was steady, alive, like a heartbeat. Her eyes widened. "This is impossible," she whispered. Her screen showed an ancient signature. The system labeled it as unknown origin. But deep inside, Kayla knew what it was. She had heard stories since childhood, legends told by elders, tales of a race called humans. Everyone laughed at those stories. They said it was only a myth, a bedtime tale to scare children or inspire songs. Humans were described as dangerous wanderers who once shook the galaxy, but no proof was ever found. No ruins, no records, only whispers. The Guild had declared long ago that humanity never existed, and yet, here was the signal, steady and calling to her like a voice in the dark. Kayla followed the source. Her craft floated past torn battleships and silent satellites until she saw it. A massive vessel half buried inside an asteroid, its metal blackened by age, its hull scarred but still proud. Unlike the twisted ruins around it, this ship looked alive, as if waiting. Her hands trembled as she brought her craft closer. Across the surface of the she saw faded letters. They were written in a language unknown to her, but one word burned clear even after centuries: humanity. Her breath caught in her throat. Every story, every myth she had heard was real. She landed on the asteroid. Her boots touched the dusty rock, and she walked slowly toward the silent giant. The airlock was broken, yet when she touched the panel, something strange happened. The ship seemed to recognize her. Lights flickered weakly, doors hissed open, welcoming her inside. Why is it reacting, she thought. Alien tech never behaved like this. Her people's machines always demanded control codes, yet this ship opened as if it had been waiting for her. Inside was darkness, but as she stepped forward, dim lights glowed on the walls. The air was stale but breathable. Her heart pounded. Every corner looked ancient, but not dead. More like sleeping. Her scanner beeped again, guiding her deeper. She passed through long corridors lined with strange symbols. The hum of power returned slowly, like a beast waking from slumber. She felt both fear and wonder. At last, she reached a sealed chamber. The scanner screamed with strong energy inside. She pressed the panel. The door shuddered and slid open. What she saw made her freeze. Rows of glass pods filled the chamber. Inside them were figures, tall and strange. They were not her people. Their skin was different, their features sharper, their bodies heavier, yet they looked almost like her, like someone who could be family, humans. She stepped closer to one pod. A man floated inside, eyes closed, chest unmoving. A label glowed faintly: cryostasis operational. Kayla's mind raced. If she reported this, the Guild would come. They would declare humans too dangerous. They would destroy the ship and erase the proof. That was always their way. But deep in her heart, she knew she could not allow the bell. As she stared at the frozen human, a soft whisper filled the room. It was not from her, not from any machine she carried. It came from the ship itself. A voice, old and broken, yet clear. Kayla stood frozen inside the chamber. Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. The ship's whisper still echoed in her mind. "Do not wake the sleepers." She turned her head slowly, looking at the rows of stasis pods. They glowed faintly in the dim light. A cold mist drifted across the floor. The humans inside looked peaceful, as if locked in a dream that had lasted for centuries. Kayla raised her wrist scanner. The screen showed weak but stable life signs. Her throat went dry. They were not dead. They were alive. Suddenly the lights above flickered. The floor hummed beneath her boots. A low vibration ran through the ship. It was like the sound of a giant heart beginning to beat again after a long silence. Kayla backed away. Her fingers tightened around her tool belt. The ship was responding to her presence. But why? She was not human. She was not even supposed to be here. A deep voice, mechanical and calm, spoke through hidden speakers. "Biometric signature accepted," it said. "Command access unlocked." Kayla's eyes widened. "No, that can't be," she whispered. The walls lit up with streams of alien text. Some symbols she had never seen, but a few were strangely familiar. She felt as if the ship wanted her to understand. guiding her step by step. The central console in the chamber came alive. Holograms flickered, showing stars, maps, and broken records of battles long ago. She watched in awe as tiny glowing ships clashed in space, fire lighting up the void. Among them were the same vessels she had seen in her people's ancient stories. The humans had fought a war, and this ship was part of it. Kayla's hands shook as she reached out to touch the console. The moment her fingers brushed the light, the ship reacted violently. Sirens blared, red lights flashed across the chamber. The stasis pods hissed, releasing steam. One of the pods glowed brighter, its glass too. Trembling, Kayla stumbled back, her heart hammering. No, I didn't mean to," she cried. But the ship did not listen. The awakening process had begun. The pod's glass cracked open. A flood of mist spilled out. A figure inside shifted, his chest rising with a sharp gasp. The sound of human breath filled the chamber after centuries of silence. Kayla's knees nearly gave out. She was staring at the first human to awaken. The myth had flesh, blood, and breath. The man's eyes fluttered open. They were sharp, piercing, unlike any gaze she had ever seen. He coughed, stumbled forward, and gripped the edge of the pod. His voice was rough, heavy, filled with confusion. He spoke words in a language Kayla did not know, yet she understood his anger, his fear, his demand. "Who are you?" Kayla's lips trembled. She wanted to answer, but no sound came out. She raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. Her people always used gestures in first contact. She pointed to herself. "Kayla," she whispered, then pointed to him, her eyes wide with question. The human narrowed his eyes. His body shook with weakness, but his spirit was strong. He pointed to his chest and spoke one word that cut through the air like thunder. "Human." The sound echoed in her head. Her whole life she had heard that word only in legends, spoken with laughter or disbelief. But now she had heard it from the mouth of one who lived. Before Kayla could speak again, the ship's voice returned, louder this time. "Warning, unauthorized activation detected. Defense protocols initializing." Panels opened along the walls. Old turrets shifted, preparing to fire. The human turned his head sharply, recognizing the danger. His eyes met Kayla's, and in that moment they both understood. If they did not act together, they would both die inside this ship. Kayla reached for the console. Her fingers flew across the strange symbols. The human staggered forward, slamming his hand onto the same controls. Somehow the system accepted both their touches. The alarm slowed, the weapons paused. The chamber was quiet again, but the silence felt heavier than before. Kayla stood only a few steps away from the awakened human. Her hands shook, her throat dry. The man's eyes followed every move she made, sharp and alert, even though his body still trembled with weakness. The rows of pods behind him glowed faintly. Some hissed softly, as if preparing to open. Kayla's chest tightened. She knew what this meant. If more humans woke, she would not be able to control what happened next. She raised her wrist scanner, her voice barely a whisper. "Hundreds," she muttered. The device showed more than 300 life signs in stasis, all stable, all alive. Her mind raced. If the guild found out, they would not hesitate. They would send warships. They would burn this vessel and kill every sleeper inside. That was their way. Destroy the unknown, erase the dangerous. But Kayla could not look away. Each pod held a human shape so close to her own kind, yet different. Their bodies stronger, their faces older, their chests rising and falling ever so slightly in frozen rhythm. She felt as if she were standing in a graveyard, but one where the dead could rise at any moment. The man stepped closer to her. His breath was uneven, but his presence filled the room. He said something in his language, pointing toward the pods. His tone carried weight, not a question, but a warning. Kayla swallowed hard. She pointed to the pods and then shook her head, trying to tell him she did not plan to open them. The man studied her face for a long moment, then gave a slow, tense nod. The ship's voice broke the silence. "Stasis integrity critical in 4 pods. Automatic revival sequence in progress." Kayla spun around. Her scanner beeped wildly. 4 pods near the center were failing. Cracks spread along the glass. Steam hissed. She felt panic rise. The human's jaw tightened. He moved toward the nearest pod, placing his hand on the controls. He barked something sharp in his language. The console blinked, and the revival slowed, but did not stop. Kayla rushed beside him. "I can help," she said quickly. Her fingers tapped on the strange symbols. Somehow the system accepted her input. Together they stabilized 2 pods, but the other 2 continued to hiss. The glass split open. Mist poured out. A second human tumbled forward, coughing, gasping for air. A third followed moments later, both weak but alive. Their eyes opened wide, confusion and fear flashing in them. Kayla's heart thundered. She wanted to step back, to run, but her legs would not move. She was surrounded now, 3 living humans awake and hundreds still sleeping. The first man spoke quickly to the others, his voice firm, commanding. The 2 nodded weakly, trusting him without question. Kayla realized he must have been their leader, a soldier or officer, someone with authority that still carried across centuries. Then the ship's systems roared again. Unauthorized activity detected, external scan initiated. A hologram flickered above the console. It showed signals outside the asteroid. Kayla's blood turned cold. Her people's patrol beacons had detected the disturbance. "They're coming," she whispered. The leader turned his head sharply toward her. His expression hardened. He might not understand her words, but he understood her fear. He clenched his fists and spoke a single word that carried through the chamber. War. Kayla's stomach dropped. Her mind screamed against it. She had not wanted war. She had only wanted discovery. Yet here she stood, in the heart of a ship filled with legends, standing beside soldiers who once fought in a galactic conflict. She looked at the rows of glowing pods once more, each one a silent promise, a threat, a hope. If they all woke, the galaxy would never be the same again. And for the first time, Kayla asked herself the question that would haunt her. Had she saved the galaxy by finding this ship, or had she doomed it? Kayla had never felt so small in her life. She stood in a chamber that was no longer silent. The sound of breathing filled the air, human breathing, heavy and uneven. The myths were awake and they were looking at her. The leader, the first human to awaken, stood in front. His body was still weak, his steps unsteady, but his eyes burned with a sharp fire that unsettled her. Behind him, the 2 new humans coughed and leaned against the pods. They looked around the chamber with wide eyes, confusion painted on their faces. Kayla's instinct told her to run, to escape before they turned on her, but something stronger kept her there. A strange pull, a mix of fear and curiosity. The leader spoke in his language again, harsh and firm. Kayla could not understand the words, but she understood his tone. He was demanding answers. He wanted to know where he was and who she was. Kayla raised her hands, palms open, showing she meant no harm. She spoke slowly. "Kayla." She pointed to herself, then carefully to him, asking with her eyes. The man hesitated. His lips moved. "Darius," he said finally. The sound of his name echoed through the chamber, simple but powerful. Kayla repeated it softly. "Darius." Her voice shook, but the man gave a small nod. Darius then pointed toward the door. His eyes narrowed. He had noticed the faint red glow of warning lights spreading along the walls. The ship had detected outside signals. Kayla knew it meant her people's patrols were closing in. Her chest tightened. She had to choose, betray the ship to her guild or protect it. She stepped forward quickly and shook her head, pressing her hand against the console. With urgent gestures, she pointed to the outside hologram showing the patrol signals. "Danger," she said, hoping he would understand. Darius stared at her for a long moment. His jaw tightened, then slowly he nodded. He might not understand her words, but he understood her intent. The other 2 humans were weak, their legs barely supporting them. Kayla rushed to one of the storage compartments near the chamber wall. She tapped the panel, and it slid open. Inside were sealed packs of supplies, centuries old, but still intact. She handed them to the humans, motioning for them to eat. They sniffed at the strange packages, hesitated, then tore them open. The smell of preserved rations filled the room. With hungry eyes they devoured the food. Their faces relaxed slightly, though their eyes never left Kayla. She felt their suspicion pressing on her like a heavy weight. Every move she made was watched. Every word she whispered was measured. Yet deep inside she sensed something else. They were as afraid of her as she was of them. The ship's AI spoke again. "Defense systems ready, awaiting command." Darius turned sharply to Kayla, pointing at the console. His expression hardened into something she had no trouble understanding. He wanted her to help. He wanted to fight. Kayla's hands trembled. Her people would not forgive her if she aided humans. They would call her a traitor. They would exile her or worse. But if she refused, the ship might destroy her where she stood. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I don't want war," she whispered, though she knew they could not understand. Darius stepped closer, towering over her. His voice was low, almost a growl. He repeated one word slowly, pressing his hand firmly on the console. "Survive." Kayla's heart skipped. The word carried meaning beyond language. He was not asking for conquest, not demanding destruction. He was demanding survival. For the first time, Kayla saw not just a myth or a threat, but a being clinging to life after centuries of sleep. A leader carrying the weight of his people on his shoulders, just as she carried the fear of her own. She closed her eyes for a moment, then pressed her trembling hand against the console beside his. The ship hummed loudly, recognizing their joint command. Kayla had never stood so close to danger. The awakened humans were still weak, but their presence was heavy. They carried a weight of history she could almost feel in the air. Darius, the leader, kept his sharp eyes on her, measuring every breath, every movement. The ship's defense systems hummed, hidden guns shifting inside the walls. Kayla knew what that sound meant. If her people's patrols landed on the asteroid, they would be torn apart. And if she tried to stop the ship, it might turn its weapons on her too. She looked at Darius. His jaw was set like stone. His hand rested on the glowing console. He had chosen already. Fight, survive, protect his people. That was all he knew. But Kayla's heart ached. Her people feared myths. They would see this ship not as history, not as survivors, but as a threat to be erased. And if they discovered she had hidden it, they would call her traitor. Darius spoke again, his words strong but foreign. He pointed to himself, then to the pods where hundreds still slept. His meaning was clear. They must be protected. Kayla pressed her lips together. She had no words that could bridge the gap, so she raised her hand and pointed to him, then to herself. Then she pressed both hands to the console and gave a single nod. His eyes narrowed, searching her face. Then slowly, carefully, he nodded back. A bond, fragile but real, was made in that moment. The AI's voice broke the silence. Dual command recognized. Non-human ally registered. Command access shared. Kayla's heart skipped. The ship had accepted her as one of its masters. She had not expected that. She had only wanted to prove she was not the enemy. But now the vessel itself had bound her fate to theirs. The two other humans watched closely, their faces pale but their eyes sharp. They leaned on each other for strength, whispering in low tones. Kayla wondered if they were two survivors of the same war. Darius gestured toward the hologram. It still showed the approaching patrol ships, red marks circling closer like hunters. His finger pressed firmly against the image. Then he looked at her. His meaning was plain. They are coming for us. Kayla's stomach twisted. She knew those patrols. They would not ask questions. They would scan, confirm, and destroy. She took a deep breath, then spoke softly. If I help you, if I hide you, my people will call me enemy. The humans did not understand her words, but perhaps they felt the pain in her voice. For the first time, Darius's hard expression softened. He placed his hand briefly on his chest, then pointed at her. His gesture was simple but powerful. Trust. Kayla closed her eyes. She thought of the stories her grandmother once told her. Tales of humans who fought against impossible odds, who were feared because they never surrendered. Perhaps those stories were not warnings, but lessons. When she opened her eyes again, her fear had not vanished, but something stronger had taken root. Decision. She turned to the console and began typing commands. Her fingers moved quickly. She rerouted the ship's signals, masking its power surge. She changed the beacon codes, making the patrols think the asteroid was empty wreckage. The AI confirmed. External scans disrupted, incoming ships deceived. Kayla let out a shaky breath. Her people would search, but they would not find the truth. Not today. Darius stepped closer, his gaze locked on hers. For the first time since his awakening, he spoke a word that she almost understood, a word that crossed the barrier between them. Ally. Kayla felt the word settle inside her like a heavy stone. She had chosen her side, whether she wanted it or not. The patrol ships outside drifted past, their signals fading into the void. The ship remained hidden, its secret. It's safe for now, but Kayla knew this safety would not last. Already she had bound herself to a human leader and his sleeping army. Already the galaxy had begun to shift. The asteroid field was quiet again, but Kayla knew it would not remain so. The patrol ships had moved on, fooled by her false signals. Yet the guild was not blind. They would notice the strange energy spike soon, and when they did, they would come with more than scouts. Inside the ancient vessel, the air was tense. The humans were awake, not many, but enough to change everything. Darius stood tall now, his strength slowly returning. His sharp eyes followed every flicker of light, every sound of the ship's engines as they hummed to life. Kayla leaned against the console, her body heavy with exhaustion. She had risked everything by helping them. She had crossed a line that could never be undone. Her people would call her a traitor if they ever learned the truth. The AI's voice echoed through the chamber, calm but cold. External threat probability rising. Long-range sensors indicate guild fleet mobilization. Kayla's stomach dropped. The guild was already moving. They had traced the signal despite her attempts. She turned to Darius quickly, raising her hand to show urgency. She pointed to the hologram where red marks multiplied across the star map. More coming, she whispered. Her voice shook, but the fear in her eyes told the story. Darius did not speak. Instead, he clenched his fist and slammed it against the console. His expression hardened. Kayla understood. "Prepare for war." The ship responded to his command. Metal groaned, hidden panels sliding open, ancient weapons unfolded from the walls and wings, their edges glowing faintly with power not seen in centuries. The vessel itself seemed eager, like a predator tasting the air after a long slumber. Kayla stepped back, horror mixing with awe. She had seen guild warships all her life, cold and sharp like blades. But this human ship was different. Its design was brutal yet elegant, made not only to kill but to end. Every line of its structure whispered one truth. Humanity built this for survival. The other two humans moved closer to Darius, speaking quickly in their language. Their voices were low but fierce. Even weak from stasis, they carried the fire of soldiers. They looked at Kayla too, suspicion in their eyes. But when Darius gave a short nod, they said no more. They trusted his decision, even if it meant trusting her. Kayla's chest tightened. Why had she chosen this path? She had wanted discovery, not war. But the galaxy did not forgive curiosity. The moment she touched this ship, her fate was sealed. The AI's voice broke again. "Enemy fleet arrival in estimated 1 cycle. Recommend defensive positioning." Kayla bit her lip. 1 cycle was not long, hardly an hour. She knew the guild. They would bring destroyers, carriers, even firebombers if needed. They would reduce the asteroid to ash. She looked at Darius. "If we stay, we die," she whispered, even though she knew he did not understand. He stepped closer, his gaze fierce. He pointed at the ship's glowing core, then at the star map showing distant systems. His meaning was clear. Escape. Kayla's eyes widened. Could this ancient vessel still fly? It had slept for centuries, buried in rock and dust, yet its engines were humming like a heartbeat. She hesitated, then placed her hand on the console beside his. The system beeped, recognizing their joint command. Navigation unlocked, preparing jump sequence. The floor trembled under her boots, engines roared, dust and stone cracked away from the ship's buried hull. For the first time in centuries, the warship stirred. Outside, the asteroid field shifted as rocks tumbled. Patrol sensors in the distance flared alive. The guild would notice soon, if they hadn't already. Kayla felt fear rush through her veins, but alongside it came something unexpected, a spark of wonder. She was standing in the heart of a legend, watching a human warship rise again. Darius placed his hand firmly on the console. His voice cut through the chamber, strong and commanding. The ship groaned as ancient engines tore themselves free from centuries of silence. Dust fell from the ceilings. The asteroid cracked beneath its weight, and Kayla felt her knees tremble as the vessel lifted. Darius stood at the console, his eyes blazing with fierce determination. The two other humans, still weak, braced themselves against the walls. Their gazes burned with the same fire, as if the awakening of the ship had awakened their souls too. Kayla gripped the railing, her heart pounded. She could not believe what she was part of. A myth was rising before her eyes, a story her people had tried to bury. The AI's voice filled the chamber. Enemy fleet arrival. Imminent. Estimated time, 30 cycles. Kayla's stomach twisted. 30 cycles meant less than half an hour. The guild was coming, and they were bringing war. She turned to Darius, her voice sharp with fear. "They will destroy us." She knew he could not understand, but her tone carried enough. Darius did not flinch. He pressed his hand on the console. The hologram of stars lit up again. New signals blinked across the map. Dozens, hundreds far away but pulsing with life. Kayla's eyes widened. She leaned closer. "What is this?" she whispered. The AI answered for her. Long-range beacon activated, signal sent to surviving fleets of humanity. Her breath caught in her throat. Surviving fleets? She stared at Darius, her mind racing. Her people had buried the story of humans, had declared them extinct. But if the beacon had truly reached others, then somewhere out there, more humans lived. She stumbled back. "No," she whispered. "If the guild finds out, they will burn everything. They will erase the truth again." The ship rumbled, preparing weapons. Turrets slid out, glowing with old but deadly power. Kayla looked at them with dread. The guild fleet would see this ship not as survivors, but as an enemy. Ready for war. And maybe they were right. The AI spoke again. Primary directive restored. Humanity survives. Kayla froze. The words carried a weight that shook her. The ship was not just a relic. It had a mission, a promise written into its core. Darius turned to her, his eyes fierce but steady. He placed his hand on his chest, then extended it toward her. His lips moved, one word falling heavy into the silence. Together, Kayla's heart hammered. She had betrayed her guild, broken the rules of her people. But now, staring into the eyes of a myth made flesh, she felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. Outside the asteroid, the first Guild destroyers emerged, sleek and cold. Their weapons glowed, aiming directly at the ancient warship. The ship's AI announced calmly, "Defensive systems online, awaiting command." Kayla looked at Darius, then at the pods where hundreds of humans still slept. She understood now. The Guild could destroy her, exile her, erase her name from history. But they could not erase this. The truth was alive, and it could not be buried again. She pressed her trembling hand beside Darius's on the console. The system recognized both of them, merging their commands. Lights blazed across the ship, engines roared, weapons hummed with fire. The ancient vessel turned its guns toward the Guild fleet. For the first time in centuries, humanity's war cry was about to echo through the stars again. Kayla whispered to herself, her voice breaking but steady. "The myth is real, and I am part of it." And as the first shot lit the void, she knew the galaxy would never be the same.